All right. Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 8 of the Weirdest of the Weird podcast. My name's Nathan. And yeah, today we're going to be reviewing Blonde. This is going to be kind of the first time I think that I've covered a movie that has come out so recently. I believe it came out about a week ago or maybe 2 weeks ago. I can't be too sure, but yeah. So we'll be reviewing Blonde, as well as Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. I'm very excited for this. I watched I watched it maybe about a month and a half ago, but I haven't had the chance to really review it in depth up until now. So I'm really looking forward to do so. Yeah, so looking forward to covering that today. So in terms of, I'm gonna talk first about Blonde, and then Eyes Wide Shut, and then also, especially, you know, more of a preface again, like I do for all my videos covering movie reviews. This will be a spoiler warning for both Blonde as well as Eyes Wide Shut. Um, it'll be a little bit more of concern for Blonde because it came out recently, but Eyes Wide Shut came out like in 1999, so yeah. if you guys don't want to be spoiled, you can click away. But yeah, I'm gonna be delving into some spoilers for both of the films. So starting off with Blonde, so this is very much so in my eyes, a rather unfortunate story of Marilyn Monroe. Now the movie does state that it is fictional, and of course I do see this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't far from the truth. This movie does show a life of a female actress at a time where um, showbiz entertainment was extremely predatory. There weren't, you know, that many women in the industry. There were, but um, it was in terms of, you know, independence of a woman being her own without having to be constantly perpetrated and harassed in this work environment. Um, Less so. Um, it was very unfortunate, and again, this was a time before the Me Too movement. I mean, I don't think the Me Too movement even existed. Um, so this is where someone like Marilyn Monroe was seen as a thing rather than a person. And you see this through the over sexualization of her in her films, and in the films that she was in and a part of. And, outside of films, uh, she was constantly barraged and stalked by the press. And it seemed like from what the movie portrayed, she had no privacy whatsoever to herself, um, even in her personal life. And the movie shows that of the people that she was engaged with in a personal relationship with, she also had no independence, in those relationships. Um, she could never really express how she truly felt, and her sense of intimacy was kind of scorned upon and scrutinized in a very negative way. Um, and anytime she did have a mental breakdown, which the way that I see it was, this is the most obvious and simplistic way of a cry for help. She was dismissed as being crazy and having to be forcefully medicated. Um, uh, this is shown in the movie, and also the movie does, show this um, in a sense of dark foreshadowing, alluding to her mother, and how she was seen as slightly unhinged mentally. Um, you know, in the same way, she was, forced to also be a sex icon and, fulfill men's desires. Um, that was that was probably the most brutal thing the film depicted, and it was it shines a light on the entertainment industry that is very terrifying, and I hope changes for you know I hope this doesn't continue to happen with other female actresses in the showbiz industry. In terms of things that I liked with the movie, first and foremost, Ana de Armas. I mean, her performance in this film is amazing. She really does show a side of her acting out of her filmography so far that we've never seen before, because I felt like she never had a main role that demanded a lot from her. Um, and I can sense that in the pressure of having to portray one of the biggest Hollywood icons of all time. So I can imagine it was pretty daunting for her to take on this performance or take on this role, but I feel like with her performance overall, she really did hit it out of the ballpark. I would not be surprised if she's nominated or let alone wins an Oscar, and sees other critical acclaim for her role in this film. In terms of things that I didn't like about the film, I felt like the NC-17 rating wasn't necessary. I felt like to begin with, this was kind of a way to stir up some drama about what was going on and what was going to be shown in the film. There were certain scenes in the film that I personally felt like didn't need to be there. Um, I get that it had to be shown to make the audience aware of certain things, but I didn't think it needed to be more than it should. Like, it kind of overstayed its welcome, and I felt like it was not asked. There was no need for it whatsoever. Um, I feel as though her mental struggles that are portrayed in the film, as well as her relationship with her mother, and more specifically her father, um, it was these were kind of covered on surface level. Um, yes, there were some key scenes, especially with her family, or more specifically her mom, but it felt a little too fictional, and that kind of drew me away from it. Um, like I can see that her I can see it being completely believable, um, of her relationship with her mom, of constantly you know showing her Marilyn being abused by her mom and having to endure that and having that trauma stay with her, and also her trying to deny that and be like, oh, she's my mother, I have to be there for her. I can see that, but I feel like there could have been more, a little bit more explanation, or more drawn out, more streamlined explanation in her trying to find her father, and you know it being a little bit more apparent. Um, I do understand that from what the movie is showing, this is one of her life's biggest mystery, but the way the movie showed it, it seemed a little bit too too Hollywood-esque. It seemed a little bit too overdramatic. Um, and the way that it's without spoiling too much. Yes, I know I'm spoiling the movie here and there, but without giving away too much, I feel like it was um, the resolve of this conflict was pretty hastily handled, in my opinion. Um, and then the big thing that kind of I did not like about this film was um, I felt that what drew me away the most from the film was the fact of how helpless Marilyn Monroe is portrayed. It's almost to an insulting degree. Like I get that the filmmakers are trying to get a message across, but I feel like in doing so, I felt really, I felt kind of like, you know, really sorry for her in the fact that, you know, I feel bad for, you know, if her family is watching this or any relatives related to her are, you know, watching this film because, you know, it seems like she's portrayed as helpless and vulnerable and didn't ever whatsoever in her life have a single moment of standing up for herself. That's really sad. Um, it didn't seem like she was portrayed with a shred of self confidence. Like, you know, you didn't see this from her in the film. And again, it's really disappointing, you know, taking that coming out of this film because I feel like it has a lot going for it in terms of, again, Ana de Armas's performance. And not only that, the filmography in the film is probably the best filmography I've seen so far this year. Um, so, rather disappointing, but it was okay. I liked it. Um, it was definitely very heavy. When I watched it, I had was like kind of like a casual Thursday for me, and I started the day off watching it. I knew it was going to be, you know, a very dramatic movie, but I didn't expect it to really mentally hit me or really, you know, hit me emotionally as much as it did. But it was all right. Yeah. Um the next movie that I want to review is Eyes Wide Shut. So, again, I know that Stanley Kubrick, you know, he's one of I don't deny this at all whatsoever. I don't deny the fact that he's one of the most prolific and most influential directors of all time. You know, I'm trying to get into his filmography. Of course, I've seen A Clockwork Orange. Of course, I've seen 2001. Um, but I still need to, like, you know, see Barry Lyndon, you know, Full Metal Jacket. I really want to dive more into his filmography for sure. But I had no idea, personally, what to make of this film, Eyes Wide Shut. Again, walking into it, I knew that this was Stanley Kubrick's last film that he made. So again, there was a sense of subtle, mysterious anticipation for me personally going into it. But yeah, so basically the premise of the film is, if I were to summarize it personally, in terms of the moral story, but also the main summary of the film, is it's basically the testing of one's marriage, specifically between Tom Cruise's character and Nicole Kidman. They, you know, respectively through this movie goes through the merits of temptation and adultery and other really devious, tricky situations that you don't want to face when you're married, I feel like. It's often rare that a director tackles a subject such as this. I've never seen someone address it in such a grandiose and almost haunting way that infuses, I feel like, the sense of, uh, you know, mind bending science. I wouldn't say science fiction, but a little bit of genre mind bending here and there. Um, but also, as well as, I feel like, utter well choreographed chaos, I feel like, is is what I took away watching, like, trying to decipher what I was watching. um but yeah, so in this relationship between Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman's characters, Tom plays a very respectable family doctor, I guess. And Nicole Kidman, she plays a real estate agent, and they're well to do. They live in downtown New York in a really high class penthouse. They have very good connections, um, and you know in terms of describing their relationship, I feel like you're never really given a sense of how long they've been married for, but I feel like from seeing the film, I feel like they're still newly married. Like, they have a kid, but I feel like their marriage is about 5 to 4 years old. So, there are a couple years into it, but it's still relatively new. Um so they have still, a sensual, sexual, and of course emotional care for one another in their relationship, and they, more importantly, care for their marriage. But you start to see that there is an awkward, untouched ground that's starting to grow in space. It's a sense of, you know, they're starting to grow a little bit distant. They're still there for one another, but it's the sense of emotional care for one another is starting to very slowly dissipate. And you see this um, from the party that they go to at the beginning of the film. Um, it's you kind of see that intimacy for one another is starting to slowly seep away from them. And this comes to a head when Nicole Kidman's character reveals a very sexual and adulterous dream that Tom Cruise, he hears from it, but you see he's interpreting it in a very sexual way, which is not very healthy. But she basically explains that she has a dream of having an affair with this sailor. Um, but keep in mind, nothing happens. This is a dream. It never happened in real life. It's a dream. Um, and then, later on in the night, Tom Cruise's character, being a family doctor, gets sent away to handle one of his patients passing. Um, and this, in actuality, ends up being this whole night, the rest of the night for him, ends up being a test for him to see how much loyalty he can stay to his relationship, as well as his marriage. Now, believe me, these sequences, in my opinion, goodness gracious, watching them transpire was utterly terrifying. I was not only tense, but keeping my fingers crossed at all times that, you know, this guy does not cheat on his wife. Um, it was because it's like it's a conflict and resolution situation that is being spanned out over the course of an hour and a half, or hour and 15 minutes, basically. And I don't know, I feel like in films I'm used to a conflict and resolution, basically being resolved like that. But what's really genius of what Stanley Kubrick does here is that he with in creating tension and in doing so, he stretches it out. And I mean, I was I felt like I was getting played. I was just like I was getting toyed with my emotions because I was just like, "Oh, okay, he's in the clear. No, wait, what are you doing? No, don't do that. No, don't do that. No, what are you doing? Stop. Please do not do this." And then that's what my mind was going through watching this movie. It was almost like watching a horror movie. It was terrifying. Um, there's even a plot point in this montage where it does make you question whether he did do an adulterous act. But I don't want to give this away. I don't want to spoil this to my listeners. I'll let you watch the film to let you figure that out. But inevitably, after everything's said and done, nothing happens, uh, or so we think. And Tom Cruise comes back home. Nicole Kidman's waiting for him, and he basically explains everything that happened. Um, and they have this conversation and just come to an understanding of what they both went through is wrong to think about, but they forgive each other. Um, what really intrigues me about this film is more specifically the making of the film itself, because it's been stated that Stanley Kubrick unfortunately passed away. Um, excuse me. He unfortunately passed away while they were editing one of the final cuts of the film. So, in some ways, we never did get the final certified Stanley Kubrick version of the film. So there's always a sense of mystery of what that cut of the film would look like. I also really find it interesting that Stanley Kubrick, he cast real life married couple at the time, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, in you know these two very titular roles. I mean, if anything, I feel as though this is kind of like an unofficial marriage counseling for them, just to kind of test their marriage almost. But yeah, I love this film exceptionally at the fact that Stanley Kubrick, again, he puts into topic of addressing a marriage, relationships, and fidelity, all in his own way. But good grief, yeah. When I first watched this movie, it was 2 in the morning. I had no idea what I was in for. And when I finished watching it, I was in a daze, solely on a fact that it felt like a tense nightmare playing out very, very slow. And I love it. I love this film. Um, but yeah, I'm hoping later in the future down the line to cover more Stanley Kubrick movies. Still have to watch Full Metal Jacket, Barry Lyndon. I'm actually very excited for Barry Lyndon because there's another YouTuber, Karsten. I watched his video of he ranked Stanley Kubrick films, so I'm kind of using that as a template of like a bucket list of what films to watch. But again, he said that, so Barry Lyndon's 3 hours long. So I'm just like, I'm kind of shrugging it off, just like, okay, I I don't do well with long movies, but I was thinking to myself, you know, if I could sit through Avengers Endgame, I can sit through Barry freaking Lyndon. But yeah, from what I've heard, it's like it's a it's a historical piece movie, but again, like I Karsten, he explained it as like a really beautifully eloquent movie. Uh, so I'm very excited to watch it. But yeah. All right. I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Weirdest of the Weird podcast. As usual, if you want me to cover anything in another video, or if there's a topic you want me to cover, go ahead and comment down below and let me know. And if you like what you're hearing, go ahead and drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Yeah, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the flip side.